The following program is made possible with support from Ann Olnick.
Hello, I'm Carol Jenkins. This Black America special, The Conscience of America, Birmingham's Fight for Civil Rights, is something of a family story. In 2015, the National Trust identified the A.G. Gaston Motel in Birmingham, Alabama, my uncle's motel, as one of the country's most endangered treasures. It was listed next to the Grand Canyon in a class deserving rescue and repair. In 2017, President Obama agreed it needed saving and included the motel in the creation of the Birmingham Civil Rights Monument. The monument honors the fierce fight for civil rights that the children, men and women of Birmingham engaged in, and in some cases gave their lives for. That was the 1960s. There are those who say we are in that fight again, with children, women, and men still dying in the streets.
My son loved this city, and this city killed my son, and the murderer gets away. Are you kidding me right now? We're not evolving as a civilization, we're devolving. We have taken steps forward. People have died for us to have these rights, and now we're devolving. We're going back down to 1969. Damn!
Valerie Castile, mother, in a scene too familiar, leaving the trial of her son's killer, not guilty.
Sir, I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
Philando Castile, shot at 7 times at close range by a police officer, twice in the heart. In this case, a dying we all witnessed live on Facebook.
He just shot his arm off. We got pulled over on Larpener.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license. Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
In the despair of the night, protesters once more took to the streets, as they had for Trayvon Martin, for Mike Brown, for Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, for Eric Garner, for Laquan McDonald, shot 16 times in the back in Chicago, and for Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old, holding a toy gun in a playground in Cleveland. Far, far too many to name. Today we call this the Black Lives Matter movement, a movement started by 3 young black women demanding respect for black people in America, even from police officers. We find ourselves once again in a racially charged time when methodically murdering people at a prayer meeting can be described by the unrepentant killer as something that had to be done.
I'm mad as hell right now. Yes, I am.
Valerie Castile is right. It does seem like the 1960s. That was when Birmingham's Bull Connor, the equivalent of today's police chief, sent snarling dogs after children protesting in the streets and named fire hoses calibrated high enough to strip bark from trees at them. These pictures are from 1963 and are the pictures, along with horrific screams as 4 little girls died in a church, that finally proved that America had a conscience.
These children, unoffending, innocent, and beautiful, were the victims of one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity.
They led to desegregation.
I hope that every American, regardless of where he lives, will stop and examine his conscience about this and other related incidents. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country.
Voting rights and housing legislation affecting not just Birmingham, but the entire country. The epicenter of that astonishing revolution of 1963 took place mostly in a square block in the small town of Birmingham, Alabama. In April of 2017, the Black America team was in Birmingham, in that square to witness the unveiling of the tribute to those who fought, to those who died here. We came to document that this contribution to American history had been deemed worthy of saving. On January 12, 2017, President Obama, in his last days in the White House, signed a proclamation that created an entity that would be run in perpetuity by the National Park Service, available to the world for visiting and for learning. It's a project of the City of Birmingham, the National Park Service, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The proclamation includes the A.G. Gaston Motel, the Black-owned headquarters for Martin Luther King Jr., who had come to Birmingham in 1963 to desegregate the department stores. Shuttered for some years and owned by the city, the motel will be restored to its glory years. Kelly Ingram Park, scene of repeated protests and arrests, including some thousands of teenagers and children, broadcast across the country. The 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 small girls preparing for choir were killed in a bomb blast in October of 1963. The Civil Rights Monument also includes the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, repository of the artifacts and exhibits telling the story of the fight for civil rights in Alabama. Beyond that, the proclamation also includes Bethel Baptist Church, led by the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, the local minister and activist who as early as the 1950s orchestrated freedom rides and lunch counter sit-ins, and he was the one who invited King to Birmingham. The 4th Avenue Business District, home to black businesses during the time of segregation in Birmingham, including the first black bank, the Alabama Penny Savings Bank. The majestic colored Masonic temple, designed by black architect Robert Robinson Taylor in 1922. St. Paul United Methodist Church, founded by freed slaves in 1869 and home to many organized protests. And the famous Carver Theater. The Black America team was on Capitol Hill on January 13th, the morning after President Obama signed the executive order using the Antiquities Act. Birmingham Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who fought for funds to preserve and honor Birmingham, was the first to get a call.
I think that Birmingham finally gets to its rightful place in the annals of history as the epicenter for this fight for civil rights in America.
Terry Sewell, Democratic congressperson from Alabama's 7th District, the first black woman representative from the state of Alabama, a graduate of Princeton, Oxford University, and Harvard Law, now a rising star in Congress.
I have to tell you that when I think about why it is I walk the halls of Congress, it's because those 4 little girls were killed in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and they don't get to walk the halls of Congress. So I take it as a special source of pride that I'm not special, but because of their sacrifice, they paid the ultimate sacrifice, and so did so many brave men and women, black and white, in this country, that folks like myself have got afforded those opportunities. I was blessed to have grown up in Selma and to go to Princeton, and my big sister at Princeton was Michelle Robinson Obama, and then to go off to law school, and my law school classmate was, lo and behold, Barack Obama. When he first called me, when I first became a member of Congress, the first 4 votes were fine, but maybe the 5th vote I voted against his environment because it was anti-coal, and I represent Alabama, which is pretty much a coal state.
Country,
and
right,
I'll
yeah.
never forget when he called, and I proceeded to tell him and remind him of what he said to me when I got elected. He said, I told him I'd look forward to being there and helping him in whatever way I can. And he said, the best way you can help me is you help the people back home. You stay in office. That's the best way that you can help me. I am just honored that this president would choose on his watch to make Birmingham civil rights sites a part of the national park system. It's just such an honor and such a privilege. And I just think that it will mean so much to the people back home, not just as a source of pride, but also economic development. The reality is that for every $1 that one spends on national parks, one yields $5 of economic development. And so we're looking forward in Birmingham and the state of Alabama of reaping that benefit.
In 2013, it was Terry Sewell who introduced legislation awarding the Congressional Gold Medal to the 4 little girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church.
Today we gather to honor the lives of 4 precious little girls, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley. To Cynthia's family and in legal documents, she was known as Cynthia Diane Morris. The 4 little girls died in the sacred walls of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, 50 years ago this week. They died at the hands of a system that remained silent about blatant, violent acts of hatred. Well, today, 50 years later, we remain silent no more.
And to the families who are here today, those who lost daughters, sisters, we just want to express, incredible thanks, not only for the strength you showed in suffering, but also for your persistence in making sure that we remembered those sacrifices.
I think that this district that I represent, Montgomery, Birmingham, Selma, is so rich in its historical significance in the advancement of African American political power and economic power, really. But I also think that history is a continuum. And so I'd like to think that this designation, making Birmingham's Civil Rights Monument, National Monument, a part of the Park Service, is a continuum of that fight to make sure that we never repeat the past, that we never forget what took place here in Birmingham, what took place in Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama, the city of Vulcan, the god of fire. Founded in 1871 at the crossing of 2 rail lines, it enjoyed astounding success as its underground stores of coal and iron were discovered. It was known then as the Magic City. From its inception, it was a place where cheap black labor gave it the advantage over other cities of high industrialization. The state became infamous for its practice of forcing chained black prisoners to mine in the caves and run the furnaces in Birmingham. Alabama was also a place that participated in the country's terror lynching of blacks. According to the Equal Justice Institute, from 1877 to 1950, more than 4,000 mostly black men, women, and children were lynched in the United States. Nearly 400 of them in Alabama, 29 of them in Birmingham proper, hundreds more in surrounding counties. Birmingham was also labeled the most segregated city in the country as Bombingham, as blacks in the South began fighting that segregation and whites retaliated. One neighborhood where many black leaders lived was known as Dynamite Hill.
I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Alabama's Governor George Wallace infamously stood in the door of the University of Alabama to block the first 2 black students. It took President Kennedy and federal marshals to get it done.
I stand here today as governor of this sovereign state and refuse to wittingly submit to illegal usurpation of power by the central government.
Birmingham's Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth was called a local agitator.
When you say you were badly beaten, how badly?
Quite badly. The first time I saw brass knuckles, I was being struck with them. This mob had chains, brass knuckles, sticks, and other things in front of Phillips High School in September of '57 when we went down and tried to enroll the children.
And had a bomb go off near his bedside.
The dynamite was placed right at the corner of the church and the corner of the house. And that's where the head of my bed was, and I was in the bed.
The city produced two well-known black daughters, Condoleezza Rice, who rose to the White House as Secretary of State in the George Bush administration.
And all of a sudden, there was this loud thud, and we knew a bomb had gone off. You just knew that in Birmingham in those days, but we thought maybe in our community. And within a little while, Mrs. Florence Rice came in. She was my father's cousin by marriage. She came in and she said 16th Street Church had been bombed. A little while later, we knew the names of the little girls who had been killed. And Denise McNair, who was one of those little girls, had been a family friend, kindergarten friend. There's a picture in the book of my father giving her her graduation diplomacy from kindergarten. So it was a very sad and in many ways terrifying day for our community.
And activist Angela Davis spoke of the idea of violence and of growing up in Birmingham.
After the four young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all three of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. What it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
How you came by your success, if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know about where else I was. I would have been around here a long time, 93 years old, you know. And I worked over there at U.S. Steel for $3.10 a day. So it's a long time before I was wealthy, as you call it.
Who was A.G. Gaston? Some years ago, my daughter Elizabeth Hines and I wrote a book about our uncle titled Black Titan, A.G. Gaston and the Making of a Black American Millionaire. His is an amazing story of accomplishment. He lived a full 103 years, traversing from the steps of his grandparents' slave cabin to the White House. In the midst of the 1963 protests, when King was arrested and wrote his legendary letter from a Birmingham jail, it was A.G. Gaston, at President Kennedy's request, who bailed him out.
My house was bombed, the motel was bombed, and but I think what I did helped save the situation from polarizing the white and the blacks, because I was kind of moderate between the two. The whites wasn't too happy with me either, you know. They say, yeah, I had money and I was supporting these radicals over here, so they was giving me hell. And the black folks, they was giving me hell, said I was Uncle Tom because I was supporting the white.
We talked on Black America with Ruby Sales, social activist, public theologian, about A.G. Gaston. She started her activist career in Alabama in the early 60s as a member of SNCC, shown here with leader Stokely Carmichael in Lowndes County.
The choices that he made to what to do with his wealth, the mere fact that he was willing to risk everything, because there could have been severe economic consequences, the fact that he was willing to house people whom the state considered to be outlaws, to be dangerous people. The mere
Martin
fact
Luther
that,
King
yes,
Jr.
Martin Luther King, and even James Bevel, and even other people in the movement stayed there. It was, in contemporary terms, he offered sanctuary. But I think people underestimate the courage and the bravery that it took for a man to go up against an establishment that was deeply opposed and was willing to use violence to contain black people within a small space of segregation.
Already an astute businessman, having made his way out of the coal and iron mines to ownership of a funeral home, Arthur George Gaston married one of my mother's sisters, Minnie Gaston, in 1939. The two would go on to build a business empire in Birmingham that included Booker T. Washington Insurance Company, Citizens Federal Savings Bank, and Booker T. Washington Business College, radio stations, a construction company, housing, senior housing, much of the 4th Avenue Black Business District, the multi-million-dollar A.G. Gaston office building, drugstores, and a motel.
It's hallowed ground.
Hallowed ground.
Marie Sutton is a reporter who grew up here in Birmingham. In her book, The A.G. Gaston Motel in Birmingham, a Civil Rights Landmark, details its opening day in 1954 as the first luxury hotel for blacks.
Yes. So there was a convention in town of black Baptist ministers, and there was a contingent there to welcome the ministers here at this convention, including the mayor of Birmingham, the superintendent of the schools, and everyone was dignified. And this young whippersnapper walked up to the microphone and greeted everyone, but then also let them know that, we want our freedom now. And as a matter of fact, you're saying we want to marry your women and things like this, and everyone was all a tither, and people actually stormed out and and then we discovered that that young man was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a very young Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
The motel became the social hub of the South, a place where top black performers played in the Supper Club, where high-profile weddings were held. Colin Powell spent his honeymoon here.
This is where Martin Luther King and Reverend Abernathy and Reverend Shuttlesworth would hold their news conferences, and everybody would come, the press and the officials would come to find out what they were going to do next.
Because this was the only place that African Americans could go for first-class hotel accommodations, everyone was here, from Ray Charles, Ike and Tina Turner. It was a revolving door. And so Dr. King, when he came to Birmingham, he was invited to stay here. And when Dr. King was here, everyone came. Journalists from all over the world, they wanted to come here. Even though they may have been white in skin color, they didn't want to stay at the Tutwiler Motel because they were covering the Civil Rights Movement, and they feared their equipment would be destroyed. So everyone would come here, Joan Baez, just everyone. And so in the mornings, Dr. King would have breakfast, and then he would have a press conference right here in the courtyard. And so there would be a sea of people listening about the day's plans for the marches and what were the plans. So he would be here with Reverend Abernathy and a multitude of ministers to talk about it. In room 30, that was his regular room. He would come and stay there every time he was there, and there were many prayers, tears, even sometimes fights and shuffles as they were strategizing what to do outside of these walls. So this was a place where strategy happened, where prayers took place, and where he found a refuge so that he can stand tall and walk out and march and preach in the streets.
The historic March on Washington would follow this seeming success, but in the fall, sticks of dynamite secreted in the wall of the 16th Street Baptist Church would detonate and kill the 4 girls.
So let's talk about the day that the last press conference, so to speak, when they announced that desegregation of the department stores would happen to some extent, the water fountains and hiring of some employees. I think those were the promises. What was that like?
There was a lot going on in the city, and there were plans to make sure that the business owners would understand the significance of patronizing and catering to and helping the black person who wants to come into your store and purchase. And so there was a selective buying campaign where they just stopped patronizing the businesses, and it hurt. And so they decided to buckle. They said, okay, you hurt us in our pockets. And so Dr. King announced that, you know, there's a victory here.
The activities which have taken place in Birmingham over the last few days, to my mind, mark the nonviolent movement coming of age. This is the first time in the history of our struggle that we have been able literally to fill the jails. And in a real sense, this is the fulfillment of a dream, for I've always felt that if we could fill the jails in our witness for freedom, it would be a magnificent expression of the determination of the Negro and a marvelous way to lay the whole issue before the conscience of the local and national community. And I think in a real sense, this Birmingham movement is one of the most inspiring developments in the whole nonviolent struggle.
The motel was bombed because Dr. King was here. Because it was here, and I interviewed the people who were the managers of the motel during the time. They said daily they would get phone calls and threats because they thought Dr. King was here. He had just left. And so it set off a little-known riot in the city because they bombed A.D. King's house, Dr. King's brother's house, but then you bombed this beacon. People were mad because that was sending a signal. But A.G. Gaston, he rebuilt, and he continued to thrive and did a lot of wonderful things here with the motel.
To better understand the major influences on A.G. Gaston, the Black America team traveled 100 miles southeast of Birmingham to the Oaks, the home of Booker T. Washington, Jr., in the college town of Tuskegee, Alabama. We were met there by Brent Legg, Senior Field Officer of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He led the effort for the Trust to save the A.G. Gaston Motel and create the monument. The Oaks is now run by the National Park Service, as the Birmingham Monument will be. Brent's mission is to save the history of Black America.
The Oaks, 1899.
This is Booker T. Washington's The Oaks. It was designed by Robert Taylor, who is America's first professional African-American architect. And it's in the Queen Anne style architecture. And as you can see, it's glorious, it's magnificent. And to be in this space, to honor Booker T. Washington as well as Taylor's legacy is pretty amazing.
Booker T. Washington was the defining influence in my uncle's life. He named several of his businesses after him. The first book my uncle read was Washington's Up From Slavery. Washington was born a slave, but after excelling in school was asked to establish the Tuskegee Institute, a technical school for blacks. He would become a powerful, nationally recognized black leader, conservative and controversial, who advised presidents. In 1901, he was famously invited to dinner at President Teddy Roosevelt's White House.
Alabama has a rich black history. When you look at Tuskegee University and its founding and think about the progression of black history and the story that can be told at these historic sites, it's pretty powerful. And then when you think of A.G. Gaston, the most successful black entrepreneur during the period of segregation, and what that meant not only to the city of Alabama, to the city of Birmingham, the state of Alabama, but to Black America. And his influence in supporting the Birmingham Civil Rights Movement is undertold and needs to be known.
Tuskegee would always prove a major part of A.G. Gaston's life. Later, as a member of the board of directors and many lunches with his friend, Dr. George Washington Carver, the brilliant black botanist and inventor who not only experimented with peanuts and sweet potatoes and soybeans as alternative fuels, but educated Alabama farmers, white and black, in crop rotation and development. President Franklin Roosevelt is said to have used his oils for his paralysis and even visited Tuskegee. Tuskegee University has special meaning for me as well. My mother, Elizabeth Gardner Jenkins, and my aunt, Minnie Gardner Gaston, attended college here. My father, John H. Young III, was a reporter for the Black Press, and later an aide to Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the minister and congressman. He was also a Tuskegee Airman, a civilian instructor in the most audacious and controversial experiment ever in America to that point, the one encouraged by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt.
It is almost impossible to imagine the impact that this place had on America in the 1940s. Long before Birmingham and the civil rights fights in the 1960s, during World War II, the question was, could black men fly airplanes? Could they fight? Well, the answer was emphatically, yes, they could, and they did.
Boy, I not get catching because it's weaving from left to right like that. But have to catch it the right way. That was a good show.
The legendary Red Tails, the first black flyers of the United States Army Air Forces who served with distinction. Performing 15,500 combat sorties, the pilots earned over 150 Distinguished Flying Crosses. Their successes led to the integration of the United States Armed Forces under President Harry Truman in 1948.
My dad was an instructor, so he didn't fight, actually, but I love what you had to say about the support systems that the actual pilots had to have in order to make this possible.
Yes. So for every pilot that was flying, you had 10 maintenance personnel that were on the ground supporting them. And so all collectively, there are about 15,000 plus airmen that actually trained through the Tuskegee experiment.
Yesterday, I fulfilled one of my ambitions as a combat pilot. Today was the first time I had seen enemy aircraft.
I was really surprised and thrilled to see that boy go down. And that was something I was waiting for a long time.
So that you were saying that there were like 15,000 pilots and supports.
Right here is actually a huge binder. In the front, we do have an answer key, basically, that tells you what you're looking at when you look them up. So what day they were authorized and things like that, and what airfield that they were going to.
That's a lot of people. Well, you know, I'm looking for my father to see if he made it in the book. Let's see, John H. III. He's in the book.
Cool.
He's right here. Wow.
As the Black America team left Tuskegee and headed back to Birmingham, we were reminded of the influence of this small city on Black America and the major influence that Booker T. Washington had in nearby Birmingham, where A.G. Gaston was building his companies. Lynn Feldman's pivotal book is A Sense of Place, Birmingham's black middle-class community from 1890 to 1930. In it, she profiles the many elite black families that found a place in Birmingham. She details Washington's involvement in the creation of black businesses there. In 1890, encouraged by Washington, the Reverend William Pettiford formed the Alabama Penny Savings Bank. By 1914, it was the largest black-owned bank in the United States. The bank did not survive much after Pettiford's death that year, but it wasn't until 1957, when A.G. Gaston opened his Citizens Federal Savings and Loan, that blacks in Birmingham had another bank of their own. But there was a lively black business district centered on 4th Avenue that thrived during segregation, but fell on hard times afterwards. The Black America team took a walk through the district, which will now get assistance through the creation of the monument. I had heard about the excitement of this place from my stepfather, Edwin Jenkins, who worked here as a printer's assistant for more than 20 years for the Wheaton Printing Company. He was always proud of this letter of recommendation he got to start Newspick, the magazine he published for black soldiers in the 1940s, one of the very first in the country, documenting black life in America and its growing affluence. Later, he and my mother would start a graphic art school, The Family Business, in New York City and run it for 45 years. A centerpiece of the 4th Avenue district, the world-famous Carver Theater. It was the only place Black Birmingham could see first-run movies and stars like Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. The Carver is now a jazz museum and part of the new monument. The city sent out into the world emissaries of all kinds. In the 4th Avenue district, there's a statue honoring Temptations lead singer, Birmingham-born Eddie Kendricks. Lionel Richie and the Commodores got their start in Tuskegee. Odetta, the revered folk singer of worldwide fame, came from Birmingham. W.C. Handy, the father of the blues, gave us the St. Louis and Memphis blues, but was from nearby Florence, Alabama.
What a difference a day made.
The incomparable Dinah Washington was also a Birmingham native.
24 little hours.
It would please me if you let me bring
Nat King Cole, who hosted his own successful integrated TV show in the 1950s, was attacked on stage by the KKK in his hometown of Birmingham. The Birmingham Black Barons, the famous Negro League team, sent many players into the major leagues, including in the 1940s the great pitcher Satchel Paige, and later on Hall of Famer Willie Mays. Birmingham and surrounding cities gave us many important visual artists. Bill Traylor, sharecropper, took up his art life at 85 and became a world sensation. Jimmy Lee Sudduth used rich Alabama mud in his paintings. Thornton Dial is known as perhaps the art world's foremost self-taught artist. The women of Gee's Bend became a sensation when their quilts were exhibited in museums around the world. And Kerry James Marshall, the celebrated artist who had major retrospectives of his work at the Met and elsewhere, thanks his Birmingham, Alabama kindergarten teacher for his introduction to art, and the 60s civil rights struggles in Birmingham for his social conscience.
I think it's meaningful that I was born where I was born, and the political and social climate of Birmingham, Alabama was the climate that it was. If you keep seeing all those kinds of things, it shapes your perception of the world.
So there is this enduring image of Birmingham, Alabama, fixated in black and white pictures and video of children running for their lives, dogs lunging at them, fire hoses knocking them down. It's a 50-plus-year-old image. What the people of Birmingham hope is that the energy and spirit of the monument will create something more positive, something more robust, that this will become known as a city of hope and reconciliation.
It started with our being able to tell the story.
Mayor William Bell is the second black mayor of the city of Birmingham. The first was Richard Arrington in 1979. Birmingham today, the city itself, has a population of just over 200,000, mostly black people. Take in the surrounding suburbs, and that number grows to just above 1 million, mostly white people. It is one of the leading banking centers in the country, home to major higher education and research institutions, telecommunications companies. But almost 30% of the residents of Birmingham proper live in poverty, double the U.S. rate. The average household earns just $32,000 a year, $23,000 below the U.S. median income. Clearly, attracting tourists, creating jobs are major goals of the city.
We're all going to move to the A.G. Gaston Motel.
Brett Leggs of the National Trust for Historic Preservation coordinated the efforts to recognize Birmingham. He was a guest on our Black America program, talking about the need to save all of our historically significant places.
Well, I like to start out by saying that there is power in our identity, and that our identity is rooted in historic places and the history that's held there. These places tell our story and who we are. And when we look to the past, we can begin to have a better sense of our collective power, our identity, and to use that to advance issues that the black community faces.
This campaign included an online petition drive to raise awareness nationally and globally for the effort. A major concert in front of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, the 16th Street Baptist Church, and Kelly Ingram Park, followed by a march through the 4th Avenue District to pay homage to the Black community of Birmingham that did so much for the whole country, indeed for the world.
My name is Lisa McNair, and my sister Denise was one of the 4 girls killed in the 16th Street church bombing in 1963. When I learned about the opportunity for this to be a national park, I was thrilled, and so were my parents, who are the only parents still alive from that fateful day. The stories of the people in this area and the sacrifices that they made need to be told so that young people and old people will know them in history, because there were stories of people who fought bravely, honestly, and peacefully for American rights as American citizens.
Mayor Bell has partnered with the National Trust and the Park Service to save and restore the A.G. Gaston Motel, shuttered for some 20 years.
Well, we want to bring it back to its original state, its original condition, when at its heyday it was one of the finest colored hotels in the country. Dr. Gaston, who was a local businessman, wanted to build something back in the 50s that any person of African American descent would feel comfortable, would feel safe and assured of bringing their family and kids to stay here as they travel. And it was sort of an oasis, and that was one of the reasons why Dr. King chose it as the basis of his headquarters when he was doing work on Project C here in Birmingham, Alabama.
I always ask my guests to place themselves in Black America, your story personally of where you grew up and who the major influences.
Well, I was born and raised right here in Birmingham, and I had a front row seat to the Civil Rights Movement, all because of my grandmother. My grandmother was very political. She lived in New York, but she spent her summers down here, and I spent part of my summers in New York. And it was always a big culture shock for me to go from Birmingham to New York, and we would always talk politics. And I vividly recall one evening, it was on a Thursday evening, I was outside playing with the other kids in the neighborhood. She said, "Come on in, you got to get dressed, we're going to church." And this was on a Thursday evening. And we went to a church called New Pilgrim Baptist Church where Dr. King was speaking. And I must have been about 12 years old at the time, and the hairs just stood up on the back of my neck. So it's sort of like living and growing up in the center of all the attention of what took place in order to end segregation in our society.
And now that you run this city, and how would you assess the status of Birmingham, Alabama in 2017?
I consider Birmingham to have been the epicenter of the Civil Rights Movement, because when Dr. Shuttlesworth asked Dr. King to come here, he made the statement that if you could break the back of segregation here in Birmingham, you could break it throughout the South. And that's exactly what happened. Now, you know, people know of Birmingham for its civil rights history, but they don't know the Birmingham of today. And we want to take the opportunity of using our past to show what we had to overcome and the places and that have a historical significance to really tell who we are today and where we're going in the future. And we want to use the opportunity of this national monument designation as an economic lever to invite people to come here and see who we are today.
And I know that my uncle had told me many, many times that his dream was for his example of success in business, that success could be translated in a widespread manner. You know, he wanted to see entrepreneurship, he wanted to see thriving. What about Black Americans in Birmingham today? How do they rate in terms of their economic well-being?
Like any place in America, we're not up to the same standard as everyone else in the country in terms of economic well-being, but we're moving in that direction. Dr. Gaston firmly believed that in America, it was green power that made the difference. And if you were a businessman or woman, you had to use the same principles of running and operating a business. As I said, his whole goal in building this hotel was to give African Americans a decent and proper place to stay as they travel. But it was also an economic motivation for him. He saw that there was a need and he sought to fill it, and that was part of his business philosophy. Where there's a need, fill it, and you'll be successful.
And you'll be successful.
Now, if you look in the balcony in 1965, the people of Wales wanted to show their solidarity with the church, and they donated that stained glass window, which we call the Wales window,
Reverend Price, the current minister of the 16th Street Baptist Church, of course wants to honor what happened here. He also wants the church and the city to be known for its vibrancy. It is so moving to me when I come to your service and there are people from all over the world who are here. I think looking for healing from that terrible tragedy of losing the 4 girls. What do you say to them?
Well, again, the church is a good place to come for healing because we don't see ourselves as a museum filled with many artifacts. We see ourselves as a hospital for healing of sick sinners. So I think people come to Birmingham because of what Dr. King did here, what Dr. Shuttlesworth did here, and found out how Birmingham was able to become a better community, even in spite of being the most segregated city in the nation in 1963. And if Birmingham can heal, then who couldn't heal from that? And they want to learn from what Birmingham accomplished. The first church was called the First Baptist Church for Colored People. When it moved here in the 1880s, it was renamed the 16th Street Baptist Church. People loved this church, they loved this structure, they loved this building. This building was probably as equal to the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia as an iconic symbol for freedom and justice. So the Birmingham community of not just African Americans, but also white Americans, not just Christians, but also Jews, came together and pooled their resources and raised $3.2 million to make sure that this building would stand as a testament of God's grace and mercy, and to show that this is a building that could stand the test of time, that people can come here and see what atrocities took place here. And although tragedy happened here, God calls us to triumph. And that took place because of the Birmingham community coming together to make it happen.
Across the street from the church, Kelly Ingram Park today is a beautiful oasis, graced by tributes to the 4 girls and other heroes of the civil rights struggles. There are other memories here too, the lunging dogs. Overlooking the park on one corner, the A.G. Gaston building where my uncle saw from his window the melees below. On the next block now, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Since opening its doors in 1992, BCRI has been visited by more than 2 million people from all 50 states and around the world.
I think we're all just beyond words. We're speechless, and we're very, very grateful that the history of Birmingham now matters to the whole world, really.
Andrea Taylor is CEO and president of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. She's been at the helm for 2 years. She came from the foundation world. People from around the world come here to look at your exhibit of the 16th Street Baptist Church and of Rosa Parks and of these, significant things that happened in our culture. Do you think that they feel healed when they leave? What do they say?
Everything from people, grown people, men and women from all around the country and all around the world, who really had been deprived the opportunity of exposure to this history. So some of them are quite shocked. They didn't really know firsthand. They didn't get it in their history classes and in their education along the way. And they're quite stunned, and you can see in their faces a kind of bewilderment and confusion and a reassessment of some of their views. Other people come in and they are moved to tears, and they have a very strong emotional reaction. And they need time to just sit quietly, and they often do in the Human Rights Gallery or the Resource Gallery, and they're just trying to process the horror of what they've seen and the fact that it happened not that long ago. It has an impact for a lot of our visitors from overseas. We have visitors really from all the continents and countries of the world, many of whom come from settings where they're still struggling with human rights and still trying to gain the freedoms that human beings deserve. And they're trying to understand how to take the lessons of Birmingham into their experience and into their community, particularly around nonviolence. What happened in Birmingham and the response of Fred Shuttlesworth and Martin King and Ralph Abernathy and others, was achieved through nonviolent means, working with adults and children in the community who had decided that they were ready and had the courage to stand up for what they believed in and to really use nonviolent tactics to achieve equity. And that's a pretty astonishing thing when you think about the world that we're living in now and the conflicts that are occurring all over the world. And there are many people struggling to achieve equality and parity and equity. And they want to know how to do that. It seems now, on reflection, so easy, but it's not so easy.
It's not so easy, and they can learn here, certainly.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Today we gather 54 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sat in a Birmingham jail cell, contemplating his message and charged to Birmingham and the American people. More than half a century later, we honor the people and the institutions who stood on the front lines in the battle to expand the meaning of liberty and citizenship. And in so doing, we honor those who labored long and hard to ensure these stories would never be forgotten.
Birmingham, let us bring to life these prophetic words of that sign, a place of revolution, a place of reconciliation. Let us become the living epistles of this history and its message. We do have it within our power to begin again. This is our moment of grace and our moment of decision. Let us proclaim today a new beginning, a new world, and a new legacy, the legacy of love.
More than 50 years after the birth of the American Civil Rights Movement, the establishment of the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument not only protects the historic buildings that are so important in American history, but it also honors the events that happened here.
I've got a job, and I want you to know.
On the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
We've got a job to do. Can't get freedom.
I'm an old foot soldier. Yes, I was. That church right over there in the background is where we would meet with Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, and all of the leaders at that time, and they would give us instructions about how to be nonviolent and how to participate in the demonstrations. So quite vivid in my mind.
I mean, I was born in the mid-'60s, so it was sort of in the cusp of all of the changes that were happening in the United States. And now being here at ground zero, so to speak, it's just surreal.
Near the end of every Black America interview, we ask our guests to finish the statement, "The power, the strength of Black America lies in." Here's what our Birmingham guests thought.
The African American people, we are so strong and resilient. We have been through so much historically from the day we set foot in this country, and time again, we get stronger.
I say it lies in our having, in many ways, been the savior. We came here to demonstrate that despite struggle, despite inequity, despite discrimination and all the things that Birmingham and the Civil Rights Movement represents, we continue to move forward.
I still think the power and the strength of Black America lies within the church. I think the church was a force in the 1960s because the church really is the only entity that African Americans had to call their own.
I think that the power and the strength of Black America lies in its faith, that we are a resilient people who have survived Middle Passage and slavery and have ascended to the highest office in the land, the presidency. And still we continue to march on, making sure that in its wake we never forget, and that with every progress may become challenges that send us back, but we continue to march forward. It's a story of hope.
And I would close by reciting a poem that Sterling Brown wrote that I think provides an optic to explain what I mean. They put us in ghettos. They took away our rights, but strong people kept a-coming, and strong people kept a-coming. And despite everything that we face, and despite all of the fragmentation, despite everything, I think we can still say, strong people keep a-coming, strong people keep a-coming.
Our time in Birmingham for the whole Black America team was an emotional experience of learning, each of us examining our own conscience. What happened in Birmingham should not ever happen anywhere in America again. Our collective idea of decency and our children's consciences will now be shaped by the existence of the Birmingham Monument. Thank you so much for joining us for this special report. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America.
I make no compromise. I think I'm proud of what I've done, even though I caught the hell on it from both sides. Because today you can see the climate in Birmingham that I think wouldn't have been here at that time. It was after we changed this thing, then the white and the black began to kind of come to the sense, and this community started growing.